Okay, hello everyone. I'm Soros Pandey and this is Microsoft Azure's training session part 2. So agenda of today's training session is I'll answer the questions that were asked in previous session or people are asking, pinging me to with their questions. So I'm going to answer this question in this session. And then I'll cover security part of Microsoft Azure and also the elastic pools, restore, which is nothing but point in time recovery, dynamic data masking and automatic tuning. The networking part I don't think I will be able to cover today, but if I'll get some time, then I'll just give you the brief about IP version 4. So let's move on to questions and answers. So many people have asked me about the certification, and most of them are SQL DBAs. So if you are a SQL DBA and you want to get certified in Microsoft Azure, then this is the certification for you, 70473, which is for designing and implementing cloud data platform solution. So this is the certification you should look for. And the next question, which was asked in my previous session by Chandip Singh Arora, that what is the difference between Geo-Replication and AlwaysOn, as Geo-Replication also support, readable replicas. So here is the difference between these two. Although Geo replications support the readable replicas, but unlike AlwaysOn, it has asynchronous readable replicas as secondary, and at any given point, secondary might be slightly behind. So you cannot, kind of directly route the read-only traffic to secondary because it is slightly behind, and you might not get the expected result. So as it support the read connections, uh, so that it uses snapshot isolation level, so that your read only traffic will not block the replication, and it only replicate the full transactions, which means it only replicate the transactions that are completed. So let me move on to next slide. And Geo-replication also support the failover groups, which is not same as the failover group in AlwaysOn. It provide you two different listener URL. One is for read-write connection, which will connect to your primary database, and another one is for read-only connection, which will connect to your readable secondary database. So the URL is failover group name. You will have to provide a failover group name, and then .database.windows.net is the URL which you can use to connect to your primary database. And in case of failover, this URL will also fail over to your new primary. And for read-only connection, the URL that you should use is failover group name.secondary.database.windows.net. So this will connect to your secondary read-only replica. And in your connection string, you should also use application intent is equals to read only for your read only connection string. But you should use this use your route your read only traffic to your secondary only if you have logically isolated your read only workload that is tolerant to certain staleness of data, which means which can have some amount of latency. If you need the live data, don't use your secondary for your read-only workload, but you can use it for your reporting, where you need the report till the previous day, or you can at least afford the latency of an hour. Then in that case, you can use your read-only listener to route the traffic of all the read-only operations. And in both the connection string, you should use multiple subnet failover is equals to true, because your servers are at different geographical locations, and you might fail the connection might fail because of the error, because these two listener has two different IPs, so it has to resolve the IPs, right? So if you'll not use this string in your connection string, then in that case it will check for each IPs one by one, and it might get timed out. But if you'll use this string, then it will check for all the IPs simultaneously, and whichever IP will connect, it will use that IP. So this is how it is. So to use multiple subnet failover is equals to true, and it is same what you use in always on, right? You are supposed to use multiple subnet failover is equals to true for your always on connection string as well, if you are using multiple subnets. So let me move on to next slide. So, okay, let me go to Azure portal. So I have three servers here. I'm going to create a failover group, and then I'll check if my connection string is working properly and failover is happening properly or not. So let me go to Azure Central Server. Let me click on failover groups, and let me click on add group. I'll have to provide a group name, which is Azure failover group. I'll have to choose my secondary server. I'll replicate this to Azure South server. And then I have the option to choose either automatic failover or just the manual failover. So if I'll choose automatic failover, then I'll also have to choose the grace period. And the minimum grace period is 1 hour and maximum is 24 hours. Grace period is nothing but if in case primary goes down, then it will wait for at least 1 hour if you have the grace period of 1 hour before initiating the failover. So if your primary is down right now, and if it will remain down for another 1 hour, then it will initiate the automatic failover. If primary comes back before 1 hour, then it won't initiate the failover. And this is taking that much of time before initiating the automatic failover because your secondary is not synchronous replica. And if it will initiate the failover right away, and in few seconds your primary comes back, then you would have lost some data, right? So that is why it has come up with the concept of grace period, and grace period is minimum 1 hour. Then I'll have to add the databases. So I want to replicate these two databases. I'll click on select, and the cost is 686 rupees. Let me click on select. Let me click on create. So it will take some time to create the failover group. I'm going to pause this video for a while, and once it is ready, I'll again resume this video. Okay, so Azure failover group is now created. Let me go inside it and let me go down. So here it is, which I was talking about. So I have read write listener endpoint, and I have read only listener endpoint. So I'm going to use these two URLs to connect the database, and I'll see if it is connecting to correct database or not. And then I'll initiate a failover, and then again check if it is connecting to now it is connecting to current primary and current secondary or not. So I'm using the command prompt for this, and I'm using SQL CMD. So I'm using command prompt as an application, and just I'll use this command prompt script to connect the database, and it will display the server name, and I'll check if it is displaying the correct server name or not. So in current configuration, Azure Central Server is my primary server, and Azure South Server is my secondary server, right? So, okay, let me run the script which is trying to connect my primary server using the read write listener endpoint URL, and it should ideally connect to Azure Central Server, as Azure Central Server is my primary server. So let me click enter. It is saying is your central server, which is the correct one. Let me check the another URL which is for read only listener URL, and it should connect to Azure South server, and it is connecting to Azure Central server, which is little weird. Let me hit one more time. Now it is saying Azure South server. I don't know why it was saying Azure Central server here, but it should always connect to Azure South server when Azure South server is your read-only replica. Okay, so now let me initiate a failover, And I have two options here, failover or forced failover. As your secondary is not in sync with primary, so if you'll click on failover, it will first sync secondary with primary, and then it will initiate the failover. But if you'll click on forced failover, then it will start the failover right away. So let me click on forced failover, as I know I don't have any transactions running on my primary. So it will take some time, and once it is ready, I'll come back. Okay, failover is completed now, and now Azure South server is my primary server, and Azure Central server is my secondary server. So I'm going to check the same command prompt script again, and this time uh, my primary server URL should connect to Azure South server, and read-only listener endpoint URL should connect to Azure Central server. Correct. So let me go back and check if it is returning the correct server name or not. So let me check the primary one first. Okay, it is not connecting. So sometimes it takes some time, although it is saying, you know, the failover is completed, but once the database failover is completed, then it initiate the failover of listener endpoint. So listener endpoint failover is not completed yet, and it might take another 2-3 minutes. So I'll have to wait for that. And once the listener failover is completed, it will display the result, and it should ideally say as your South server now. So we'll come back in 2 minutes and check if it is returning the correct server name or not. Okay, so we will check again. Let me check my primary read write listener endpoint connection, and it is connecting to Azure South server, which is my correct primary server. Let me try the read only listener endpoint connection, and it is connecting to Azure Central server. So it takes some time to reflect, because first it initiate the failover for the databases, and once it is completed, then it will initiate the failover of the listeners. So it might take another 3-4 minutes to fail over the listeners. So if you are not getting any result back, it is throwing the error when you are trying to connect, or it is still returning the old primary server name, then don't get panicked, and we just wait for another 3-4 minutes. It will fail over for sure, and after 3-4 minutes it will return the correct server name. Okay, so this is what I wanted to cover for geo-replication and failover groups. And next topic that I'm going to cover today is security. Okay, so there are a few differences when you talk about the traditional SQL Server and Azure SQL Server. So the difference between these two is in SQL Server, once you create the login, you will be able to at least connect to the server, but you won't be able to see the data in any database until you will not assign a server-wide role, or for any database a database-wise role. But here you won't be able to connect after creating the login, and if you want to connect to any database or even connect to any server, you'll have to create a user, and once you have created the user, you can connect to the database, and then you'll have to provide a database level permission to the user, so that user can do something on that. Suppose you want the user to see the data into the tables, then you'll have to provide DB read only, uh, you know these different roles that you have to provide to your user. So let me go back to my slide, and for security, I'm going to create two users and check if they are able to connect and how they are able to connect. So let me go to SSMS, and I'll connect to Azure Central Server. Azure admin password. Okay, now it is connected. So let me click on new query. Okay, so I'm going to create two logins, user 1 and user 2 with password. This is the password. And logins like traditional SQL Server, I'll have to create the logins under master database. So let me click on execute and it is created. Let me see what databases I have here. So I'm gonna use Azure Central DB to create the user. So, okay, first I'll check if after creating the login, if I'm able to connect or not. So user one, okay, let me try to connect. No, I'm not able to connect because the server principal user one is not able to access the database master under the current security context because I haven't created any a user for this login. So let me go ahead and create a user for this login. So the script that I'm going to use is create user. I can give any username here, but I'm going to use the same username what I have used for login name. And the database I'm going to use Azure Central DB. So let me change the database name here. Okay, let me create these two users. Okay, use statement is not supported to switch between the databases. Okay, yeah, this is how Azure works. So we cannot do anything. Let me open one more session and I can remove use database name here and let me create two users. Okay, now users has been created, but I haven't assigned any role yet, right? So let me try to connect to my server using this login. So I'll say user one, I'll pass the password and let me see if I'm able to connect or not. I am able to connect, but I'm able to connect because if I'll go to options, uh, okay, so here the connect to database is default and I have also created the same user by mistake on master database and default database is master database. So if I'll go and check if the same user has already been created in master database or not, then I can find these two users because I have run the create user script on master database and accidentally it has created the user. So let me delete this user. Okay, now I have deleted the user from master database, although login is still there. And I also have these users under Azure Central DB. So this user should ideally be able to connect to Azure Central DB. Let me try to connect again with user one or user two. Okay, I will try with user one. And now it is showing the error because it is not able to connect to master database. So what I'll have to do, it this user doesn't need the access of master database because this user is not an admin. So I'll just have to go ahead and change the default database name here. So connect to database name here, so I'll say Azure Central. Okay, I know it is not able to access Azure Central DB. Okay, now if I'll try to connect, it should connect now. Okay, so this is like a contained database where you'll have to also provide the database name which you want to connect, then only it will work, right? So after that, I'll also have to provide the database role. So if I'll go to databases, I'll go to the database as your central DB and I cannot see the other databases. I also have two other databases, but I cannot see them, right? If I'll go to tables, I cannot see any table here because there is no table for now. But let me go ahead and create a table. So if I'll create a table, create table test ID int, and I'm going to create this table on Azure Central DB. Okay, now I have a table in Azure Central DB. Let me refresh this again. Let me expand this, expand tables. I won't be able to see the tables because I haven't assigned any role to my user yet, right? So I'll go ahead and assign a role to my user. So I'm going to assign a role of DB owner to user one and DB data reader to user two. So let me execute that and let me refresh my tables. Okay, now I can see this table because I have assigned the role to my user now. Okay, so let me go back to my slide. Let me go to next slide. So in Azure, there are two new roles which you will find under master database. One is login manager and another one is DB manager, which is similar to you know access manager or access admin and DB creator role in traditional SQL Server. So you can also assign these role to your users based on your requirement. So that those users will be able to create the logins or create the database or manage the database. So these new roles are available only on Azure, but these are very useful ones because most of the server-wide roles are not available in Azure. So you can go ahead and use these database roles. Okay, so this is what I wanted to cover in database security. The next